Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Human Echoes podcast.
I'm Tony Southcott.
I'm Albert Berg.
We're coming to you today with Marvel's newest release, talking about Ant-Man.
Ant-Man! This is the movie that I'm excited for, only slightly less than Aunt May movie. Alright, but Ant-Man's way up there. I had to do that joke, Tony. I've been sitting on that joke. Did you know that they're actually thought about making an Aunt May movie?
For a second, I was like, are they really doing that? I mean, I could almost see them trying to pull that off, but I just don't see anything about her needing her own movie.
No, she was it was going to be a whole thing where she was a spy, and, it was sort of like Agent Carter, back in the 60s or something, and none of this has anything to do with the movie, but I'm going off the rails, because we're having a weird morning.
We're talking about Marvel, so everything's related.
But no, I'm gonna preface this by saying I'm gonna recommend this movie. I think this is a good movie. I want you guys to go watch it. But you got to go in with not super high expectations. You don't have to go in with low expectations. Tony, you went in this movie thinking it was gonna suck.
Yeah, I thought that I just didn't feel it from the trailers and everything. I had some faith because Marvel hasn't really done us wrong, except for Iron Man 3. And it's going to happen.
Some people would argue Iron Man 2. Some people would argue Thor 2. I don't think they've really had a stinker. They've had some that just didn't hit as well.
Yeah.
And this is not their first stinker. I gotta say, I mean, even if this movie isn't for everybody, people get weird, I heard some people complaining oh, it's getting low reviews on Rotten Tomatoes. It's it's in the 70% range. Avengers 2 got around there, and I would say both of those deserve the 70%-ish type of rating. I like this better than Avengers 2 by quite a lot.
I do too. That's actually what I was talking about earlier today is, Avengers 2 was okay. This movie actually tried to do something different, tried to be a little more fun, tried to be a little less serious, and it hit on all levels for me.
Well, an Avengers movie has to be an Avengers movie, though, Tony. You know what an Avengers movie looks like, so, at least so far, I think the 2 was trying to fit the mold and sort of satisfy all those fans that had seen the first one and knew what to expect, and they were, they had all that in mind, so, but when you get to, Ant-Man, nobody knows what to expect from Ant-Man. Even if you read the comics, I think people who would have read the comics would have been like, this is the hero why Ant-Man? And on paper, it's one of the worst ideas you can imagine. If it had gone bad, everybody would have been like, well, yeah, obviously, you adapt a movie like Ant-Man, called Ant-Man, it's gonna be stupid. What's wrong with you?
Well, that might have also been why they were willing to take a risk on it, too. It's if it doesn't work, then nobody expected it to.
But it does work, and it works in the weirdest possible ways. I mean, first of all, it's a movie about a guy who shrinks, which is silly enough that it is, but he shrinks down and talks to ants, and the talking to ants is not incidental. It's not like some kind of, the ants help him out this one time, and then, he goes back to just being a regular superhero. They do not shy away from the fact that his superpowers, one of them, is being able to talk to ants.
Yeah. Or at least display his intentions to them. He's not
psychically control them or whatever. He has a thing that it's a little device, but you know what I'm saying?
It's a modified hearing aid.
The ants are a huge part of this movie. I mean, how do you make a movie with this kind of budget from this studio about a superhero who talks to ants and it be this good?
I don't know. I'd have to give this movie a solid 8. There are some flaws and everything, but this movie was so much more fun than I expected. You could feel that Edgar Wright influence in it. You could feel a lot of the intention behind it and how well crafted it was. There was a lot of time put into this movie. Everything from the macro photography to just the script in general.
I really think, interestingly enough, you talked about the influence of Edgar Wright. I think that Peyton Reed really has his stamp on this as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Coming in as a comedic director, Edgar Wright tends to have... His stuff is very funny, but it also tends to be a little bit more grounded and more serious, and this was a lot... that was part of the reason why I think that Marvel had to part ways with him, because they needed to go with that sort of lighter, more comic booky tone that Edgar Wright doesn't really do. He does things that are comic book related, like Scott Pilgrim versus the World, but they, by the time they got to Ant-Man, they're like, all right, now we're actually ready to produce this movie that you've been working on. The tone of the Marvel Cinematic Universe had been set to such a degree that he wasn't able to execute the vision that he had originally said, and you can't just go off and make it be its own thing. It has to sort of fit in, which it does. But I think that Peyton Reed really did a good job coming in, putting his stamp on it. It'd be interesting to know the meat of how it all went down, of how much of this was Edgar Wright and how much of it was new writing and all that other stuff. I mean, some of the fight scenes
where the scenes link over.
Yeah, some of the scenes are directly lifted from even the early test footage they did, where you see him running on the gun and stuff. Some of the early Comic-Con stuff that you could have seen back when Edgar Wright still was attached. Those scenes are actually carried over into the movie directly. So obviously they didn't throw all of his stuff out. But I thought it was a great amalgamation of both of their talents, and really, this is possibly one of the funniest Marvel movies, if not the funniest Marvel movie that is out there.
I'd call it the funniest, just because the reaction in the theater was just boisterous laughter every few minutes. It wasn't the full on comedy, but it was enough of one that I would call it like a superhero comedy.
Yeah, it's definitely almost that's a really interesting line that it walks to, because it never it's not servant to the jokes, if that makes sense. It doesn't feel like it always has to make a joke, because it is a superhero movie and it is an action movie and it can do that stuff too. But when it does make the jokes, and it makes a lot of them, most of them really work.
Yeah.
And you have really great sort of comedic people in there. Michael Pena steals the show.
Absolutely. Michael Pena, he was in End of Watch, which was an awesome movie, but
a very different type of character.
Yeah. Well, there's still some of that humor in there. You could definitely tell that that's just part of Michael Pena. But the way they set him up in this movie, where he seemed kind of dumb, he seemed kind of just the criminal, the criminal guy that he is, and then just they bring in a different element every time he's telling a story. It happens twice in the movie, and it's absolutely perfect.
Right, the thing where he's telling the story and the people are moving their mouths in time to his talking over the story. I think I may have seen that before, but having it was so extensive with so many different characters, and his accent, just being hilarious, and his delivery, and seeing those words then being put into those people's mouths that obviously didn't quite fit. That was...
Yeah, especially because he's like, oh, I was at this wine tasting, and it was all reds, and you know me, I'm all about the whites, but there's this perfect rosé that just got it. You just don't expect it from him. Later in the movies, we don't want to spoil too many of those sorts of things, but it's just perfect.
And I was those jokes for me possibly were the best jokes in the movie. That when he does it that time, and he does it at the end with the art exhibit, and you just you're not expecting this highfalutin artsy type talk from this guy who is a criminal.
I also like how shady all their clues are, and it's oh, I heard this from my cousin who's heard it from his from this cleaning lady he knows and everything, and it's always just completely perfect and accurate.
Yeah, and he just goes through the whole, I don't know, his stuff, and even his delivery of lines that maybe wouldn't have been funny on the page were just so top notch and on target that I thought this is great.
Yeah.
But I also thought that one of the things that really sets it apart from a movie like Avengers is that it has different stakes. In a movie now granted, it's still a superhero movie. Technically, the fate of the world is still in the balance, but the giant climactic scene, which you've seen bits of in the trailer, in something like an Avengers, it's about, saving the world. The fate of the world is at stake, and everybody has to work together to save the world. In the climactic scene of Ant-Man, it's the fate of a little girl's bedroom. And taking that down, literally taking it down in scale, but also taking it down to the personal level of he has to protect his daughter, he has to make sure that she's safe, and not just safe from the evil bad guy, but there's the whole thing where he's an ex-con, and he's trying to get by, make an honest living, and, his wife's like, look, you got to get your act together before you can come see your daughter, and he has the whole, he figures it out on a piece of paper, and 377 days till he can see his daughter.
Yeah.
Which is eventually why he goes back to his life of crime. But
yeah, because not even Baskin Robbins will keep him, because Baskin Robbins always knows.
Baskin Robbins, they always find out, man. The fact that they brought that joke back like 2 or 3 times, that was great. I don't know, and just that whole sequence at the beginning too, where he's like, I'm an electrical engineer, I can find some kind of work, and just like smash cut to, hello, welcome to Baskin Robbins. And he wasn't even, like, he's even a good worker, right? He's not like, hello, welcome to Baskin Robbins, I'm a criminal and I want to, like, he doesn't have some kind of angst thing going on.
Yeah, it's not, this work is so below me, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, he's like, all right, this is the job I can get, I'm going to do this job. And then they're like, yeah, we find out. Baskin Robbins always finds out, you're fired. So, I thought that was really great. And, and his whole attitude, I think, through the whole movie, like, he's a little bit deadpan, like, I think Paul Rudd and Scott Lang, the character together and the way the actor plays him, not the most compelling hero in the sort of Marvel Cinematic Universe. He's not like Iron Man where he's throwing quips around and all cocky and stuff. He gets a little bit cocky from time to time, but he's not like, he doesn't have that aspect to him. He's not, sort of the Shakespearean Thor. He's not even like, he's just sort of a down-to-earth dad type.
Yeah.
And you really get that, that really comes through. He's very much just this grounded character that doesn't have a lot about him that, you find out that he's pulled some heists before and all this other stuff, but he's not really some kind of fantastical off-the-wall character. He's very, very real and feels like somebody that you could meet in real life, unlike, somewhat Captain America you could maybe meet, but Thor and Iron Man and those guys, like, they feel so much larger than life. Even Jeremy Renner, like, it was interesting in the second Avengers movie, they're trying to make him, and it was an interesting scene where they showed, like, oh, he's a family man, he's got a normal life and everything, but this guy starts out with a normal life and then catapults into the superhero. He is one of the most, I want to say, grounded, if that's a word. Like, he comes from, very similar to Spider-Man, he comes from being a normal dude and then gets the powers. None of these other guys start out as normal dudes. He was never expected
to become a superhero. He never had, like, he never would have had the opportunity if it wasn't for Michael Douglas's character.
Yeah, he wasn't even going off and trying to fight. I mean, he is good in that he's trying, his initial break-in that got him in prison was him trying to sort of give back to the people, but really he just wants to get by and live his life. He has no aspirations to do anything but be a good dad. And that makes him different and interesting and, in my mind, really cool. And in the ways that maybe he's not interesting enough, they have other characters in the movie to fill in for him. They have the Michael Peñas he can bounce off of and have that contrast. They have the Russian dude and, who kind of, adds that flavor. And then, what's the girl Pym's name?
It's Hope.
Hope. Right, Hope Pym. Like, all of those people contrast him in really interesting ways so that it builds him up to be a better character by bouncing off of them.
Yeah. And, like, Hope was played by Evangeline Lilly from Lost and more recently from the Hobbit movies, and she did an excellent job with this. It's kind of weird how she's more transitioning into an action hero.
Yeah, and I liked, it's debatable about whether this movie is an origin story or not. Certainly for Scott Lang, it's an origin story, but it's also, one thing, it's not ashamed to be set in the Marvel Universe. Like, they interact with elements of the Marvel Universe, which I won't go into in detail for sake of spoilers, but all of this stuff, you come into a world that's fully developed, and I think Hank Pym and Hope's relationship is really interesting in that this isn't their origin story. They've been living this life for a long time, and she's been, itching to get into the suit, and for her it's a big slap in the face that, her dad is going after this ex-con. And I think that there's a little bit of sort of meta commentary there in that she's a female, she wants to be a superhero, the guys aren't, are sort of shoving her out of their club. But it makes sense within the context of the movie and really adds some heart to it as well that, Hank Pym and Scott Lang are both people that care about their daughters. and are, they want to keep them from being harmed. I think it's possible that Hank Pym's fear of letting her get hurt is a little bit less well placed because his daughter's not a little girl anymore, and
she's also really, really good at what she does. She's good at fighting. She's good at controlling the ants. She's good at all that.
There's definitely an argument to be made that, like, why is she not? I mean, she makes the argument. Why am I not the guy in the suit or lady in the suit, whatever? And I kind of expected, honestly, more to come from that, and more will come from that in the future, but I thought there would be more of her in this movie really doing her thing, and that may be a little bit of a disappointment, especially for those of y'all who are really excited for the idea of more gender equality in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, for more girls with stuff to do other than have guns. Which, I mean, Scarlet Witch is great. It's not Scarlet Witch. Although Scarlet Witch is in there now, but Black Widow, Scarlett Johansson. Why do we have to have an actress named Scarlett and a character named Scarlett, and they're not the same character, Tony? That's forever confusing to me. That's an aside, though. But point being, like, they really did a good job of setting her up as potentially doing something in the future, and I thought that was cool. And I'm excited to see what she does, because she is so good. She's so good at the martial arts. She's so good with the ants. Like, she's really a better hero than he would have been. They give him the montage and kind of get him up to speed so he doesn't suck. But I mean, even through that, like, she's still training him, and he does.
Yeah, she's still throwing flying triangle chokes and all sorts of other things at him.
There's never a point where you could be like, man, if she was in that suit, she would have sucked. It's a good thing it's a guy in there.
Yeah.
So I'm definitely looking forward to where they're going with that. But to speak to that, the action in this was, I mean, really, really inventive and cool with what they did with the size-changing stuff and the throwing around of momentum.
Yeah, like just the back and forth where you go big, you go small. Someone tries to punch at you, all of a sudden you're small running towards them. Then you're flying through the air and your fist becomes huge and you just clock them right in the face. Just so many different ways that they used it. It was very well choreographed scenes.
And the miniatures in this as well, not miniatures I should say, but like the miniature photography, but I guess they called it macro photography, where they were shooting real stuff like at a really, really close angle. So when you get scenes like when he first shrinks and he's in the bathtub, that's, at least I'm pretty sure that's real water coming down there. So they avoid the cost of having to animate all of that stuff, and they just sort of composite him in to the scene.
It's funny, if you look at the credits, like there's a 25-person team for macro photography and a whole load of compositors. Like, it's all, like, there's a lot of work put into just making all that work. But it looks so much better because of it. Like, even some of the stuff in the sewers just looks so much better because you're looking at actual pipes and actual water. And I'm sure it was really weird. It's like you're trying to figure out what path Ant-Man's going to run off of. You're trying to time it all perfectly. And it worked amazingly. Like, they just looked so much better having the real sets with the CG, like, just as like showing the explosions and doing things like that, just making it show so that it was actually there, and only like the CG was only masking things or adding to it, wasn't having to create an entire scene.
I really liked too. We mentioned the water pipe scene. I loved that they did the ant raft thing.
Yeah. Because
that is a real thing that ants actually do when stuff floods, is they make a raft, and they can hold their breath for a certain amount of time, so like there will be just this giant glob of ants just all hanging onto each other, and they shift places. So the ones that are under the water will come up, and the ones that are above the water will go down, so that the raft, like, they all stay, have oxygen and stuff. And when I saw that, you can go back and watch the Smarter Everyday video where he talks about it. But I saw that, I was like, oh, they did, like, the actual research with actual ants. Like, they figured out what ants could really do.
Well, that species is pretty interesting because I've seen the videos where they make those bridges, where they do all that sort of stuff, just like the full-on teamwork thing. And it was really cool seeing. I liked that he actually had multiple breeds of ants too, like multiple species. Like, he had the bullet ants for attacking, which would suck. I would hate so bad to just, like, all of a sudden be bit by like 12 bullet ants in different areas. That would be fully debilitating. They say it's like getting shot, or it feels like getting shot.
I've never experienced that, but I mean, like, it was very well done. And by the way, nitpick thing of the day: carpenter ants, not actually ants, but if you could psychically talk to ants, you could probably figure out other insects as well.
Yeah.
But I thought that was great. There was some, like, that scene where he's running through the model factory or facility or whatever, and they're shooting at him, and the paper buildings are blowing up, but like getting hit with the bullets and like shredding into paper. One of the most inventive action scenes I've seen, like, because they really put that to use. They put him in this like, environment that's his size, but it's still like this. It's blowing up in a way that you've never seen buildings blow up before.
Yeah, just bullets ripping through like paper and styrofoam and everything.
Yeah, and that was so neat to see them do that stuff. The battle at the end with the Thomas the Tank Engine, if you've seen the trailers, you've seen like the one bit with the Thomas the Tank Engine, but that actually continues to play out in like very interesting and new ways. And I liked too, despite the fact that I think this movie the marketing wasn't great on this movie, Tony. But
yeah, like that's why I was worried about it. I thought it was clever when they did like the ant-sized teaser, but whenever I actually saw the real teaser, I was not impressed. The second trailer, or the first full-length trailer, kind of had me interested, but it's not like I usually get whenever I see a new Marvel movies coming out.
But if you're one of those people that's always complaining about like they showed everything in the trailer, the great thing about this movie is they didn't. And maybe they should have showed more, because there are great moments and great jokes that you see pieces of in the trailer, but when you get into that actual scene, it continues to play out. It's not like they just like, well, we showed you our one thing we have from this scene. All of those things continue to build, and they showed you like a piece of that, that scene that's really cool, but the way that scene will continue out with the Thomas thing, with some of with the best one, in my opinion, was when he does the Daddy Don't Get Scared thing with Michael Pena. Like,
they never,
I never saw a trailer where they actually paid that off the way that it pays off in the movie.
Yeah, because like in the trailer, he just says that. You don't see like the context about what's happening.
So I thought that, awesome. Yeah, I've got to recommend this. I don't want to overhype it, because there's inconsistencies. The heist is not the greatest heist in the world.
It's still a new direction, though, because so many of the Marvel movies are like, all right, we're establishing the big bad guy, there's going to be a bunch of fights. And that happens here. But the way they get to those is different enough that it feels like a different type of movie. It's definitely Marvel. It has the fingerprints all over it. You see things from, like a lot of references to the Avengers. You see some other really cool stuff happening that's all part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But it's like it's just a little bit different. It's different enough that we can actually see some cool new things and see like the abilities of Ant-Man. And it makes more sense that he'd be doing the heist just because of what his powers are.
And I thought too that their explanation of, like, he has that scene where he says, I think the first thing we should do, like, once Hank Pym explains all that, I think the first thing we should do is call the Avengers. And Hank Pym's like responses to that is, I've spent my entire life keeping this technology out of the hands of people like the Avengers. No,
yeah, this is not. Like, I fought to keep it out of any Stark hands.
Right, and he's like,
which was kind of cool. They brought Howard Stark in at the beginning too.
Yeah, that was cool, and the whole like aging up and aging down thing was really good with him and what's her face from Agent Carter, I guess.
Yeah, I can't remember the actress's name, but she's pretty awesome.
But like that bad guy too. You mentioned him. I thought, people have complained that Marvel's bad guys aren't, the most epic and scary things in the world, and this is not necessarily going to break that trend completely. But I thought that he was one of the better bad guys. He's not a Loki or anything like that, but he's definitely more interesting to me than somebody like not Thanos. Who's the guy from Guardians? Ronan.
Yeah.
Where Ronan really had a potential to be something very cool. This is just a guy who's crazy. Like that, he has some issues with Hank Pym where you can, go into it and say, oh yeah, well this is why and this is why, and sort of delve into the reasons behind his, some of his issues. But really, he's just gone crazy because of his exposure to the Pym particle without proper shielding. And he works, like, he's just so great and creepy. He's such a great sociopath, the sort of like the affable, the nice, but he will kill you in an instant while he smiles at you. And that, I thought, was really good.
Yeah. I love that gun he has at the beginning of the movie. I was hoping that would come into play a little bit later.
I really thought it would too. I thought that for sure, like, they would use like a shrink ray failure as a way to kill somebody or something, but they did not, and it worked out. I thought too that we talked about the fact that he gets into his suit way later in the movie. Like, he doesn't get to shrink until close to the very end, and yet one of the things that makes him so scary is the fact that he's really bad at using it. And he has these laser weapons that are just firing all over the place. And
it's just chaos.
Yeah, he's just killing people left and right, not even halfway meaning to. He crashes his own helicopter because he's firing wildly with the thing, and it really adds to interesting dynamic to his fight in that he is both crazy and also completely... He's got that sort of... You don't really want to fight somebody who's a novice because they're not going to act the way that you expect them to act. They don't have the sort of reactions and the built-in, sort of, they don't understand the rules of the fight yet, so they may take you completely by surprise with something they do.
Yeah.
That added an interesting aspect to that final fight as well, so I would definitely give this an 8, Tony.
Yeah. A very, very solid 8. Like, it could be higher on some days, could be lower. I felt kind of bad because my left eye is pretty messed up right now, so I missed about a quarter of it. I actually walked out of the 7 o'clock showing and had to go to the 8 o'clock one after getting some pain pills and everything because I could not keep my eye open.
Oh, really?
So I missed
Tony's
probably
suffering from iritis, people.
Yeah, you can probably see it on camera a little bit right now because we got these fancy new cameras. But I had to go back and do the other one later after taking some ibuprofen and some other stuff just to make sure that I could actually focus on it. I literally sitting forward in my chair with my eye covered up, just trying to deal with it. So it felt like the first part of my viewing was a little bit tarnished. I wasn't enjoying it near as much as the second viewing, or I was in it for about a half hour for the first one. But thankfully they had a second one, and they didn't charge me twice. They were nice enough to understand what was happening.
Interesting thing for me is that I also had issues with my viewing, not with my eyes, but I want to say 20 or 30 minutes in, when the bad guy's first showing off the technology, the projector cut out in our theater, and we were with nothing but sound for about 30 seconds, and then everything shut off, and we were just sitting there for 5 minutes trying to figure out. Nobody came out and said anything, or was like, sorry folks, we'll have it back up in a minute, and I was like, should I go ask for a refund? Are they going to start playing it again? I was texting and stuff, so I didn't worry too much about it. I figured they would figure something out eventually. But
yeah, it's not like they're just going to start it 30 minutes later after they fix it and not be synced up to the right time. Hopefully.
Yes, that was they fixed it and it was fine. Fortunately, I was a little bit worried. I was like, did they have a scene skipping function up there where we don't have to watch the whole movie again, do we? But luckily they were all set up and all that stuff was fine. But definitely, I want to recommend y'all, if you are any kind of fan of superhero movies and you're a fan of the Marvel Cinematic Universe at all, I think this is a great addition to that canon. And
definitely give it a chance. It's totally worth the $7 or whatever to go see this in theaters right now.
It has me more excited for the next Avengers movie than or possibly Captain America: Civil War, because that's really the next Avengers movie. But to see, first of all, the stuff that they laid out and the ideology that we now have with Ant-Man, where he has a power that he can't give to the Avengers. So that's going to be something too, where he's not going to work with Iron Man. If Iron Man's on the side of the government and becoming more, legit, let's say, with being a superhero rather than just flying around and doing your own thing, and Captain America says, we're not taking orders from them, that turns bad sometimes.
Especially after what happened with S.H.I.E.L.D., in his last movie.
Right, that's going to be such a great dynamic between, and two, the personalities are so different. They both have a suit that gives them the power to do but Tony Stark. I started to say Tony, I was like, I'm talking to Tony. That's not right.
Hey, we have the same initials. It's okay.
Tony Stark is out there, he's all cocky. He's got all the money, and he's certainly going to be, making fun of the fact that the suit shrinks. But, Scott Lang probably is a little bit more powerful than Iron Man. Iron Man brings more firepower.
He'd have a hard time getting to Iron Man if Iron Man just flew up a little bit. He's got those flying bugs, but Iron Man's a lot faster.
Iron Man might not see him coming, though.
That's true.
Although they do have
he could just crawl into his nose while he's at a party and just pop out.
Oh! I don't want to think about that aspect of his power. Jeez. Oh! Let's never see that. I don't want to ever see No.
Watch, that's how they kill Thanos. He just crawls into his ear.
Him and Squirrel Girl. Which is not off the table. If we can have Ant-Man, by golly, we can have Squirrel Girl. And if this can be as awesome as this was, especially the new run of Squirrel Girl, I've been hearing so many good things, and I want to read the new run of Squirrel Girl. Hopefully they'll collect it into a volume and sell it for like $2 because I'm a cheap Tony. But
I need to do that, like that app thing that Marvel has. I know DC has it as well. Like you pay $10 a month to Netflix. It's like a Netflix thing with comics. I just don't know how much of the new stuff it has.
But that definitely, guys, go see Ant-Man. It does tie in with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and especially it really fleshes out sort of more of the ideology that's going to be going forward with Civil War and, you know, with the sort of conflict that's going to be coming up in Avengers. So I'm very excited for that. And we will see you guys next week with our review of Big Trouble in Little China. No, not Big Trouble in Little China.
We
Chinatown.
did that a couple weeks ago.
That was previous.
Chinatown.
We already did. I was more movies set in Chinatown, Little China, whatever. But we're gonna be reviewing Chinatown, starring not Leonardo DiCaprio, but he looks like him in this. It's from the 1970s. Dang it, Jack Nicholson. Tony hasn't seen it yet.
No, and I was just trying to figure out how Jack Nicholson would look like DiCaprio.
What the haircut and the mannerisms and the stuff, you'll see. See. There's an affect there that is very, very similar. But anyway, regular Human Echoes podcast. This is our 0.5 episode, but the regular episodes will be back next Friday. As always, check out our review of Teeth, which just came out yesterday. Also a very different kind of movie.
Yeah,
and
I suppose it has to do with like pretty terrible creatures and everything. There could be a link if we search hard enough, but it's definitely different. Check it out. That movie's also on Netflix. Go to humanechoes.com. You can watch the video of it or on our YouTube channel. And just, check out humanechoes.com. You'll find a lot more information, a lot more reviews. Thank you guys for listening to our review of Ant-Man. We very much appreciate it.
And we'll see you next week. Like and subscribe.
Bye.
Bye.